People didn't really talk about leaders except political leaders or world leaders. It was managing. And now it is really evolved into understanding that leaders have a different role. So it is around developing people, like I said, getting them to make the decision. It's about keeping them on target, right? There's so many distractions, and you just talked about a few of them, but there's also distractions like internally. I was working with a client, very, very, very successful, had high targets for their people, almost like, well, we can never make this happen, right? We do work around mindset around that. But what happened was, it was so incredibly interesting that people would start to get distracted by this number. I have to increase my sales by 50%. I can't do that. I can't do it. I can't do that. And it became a distraction. So the leader would come in and talk about, listen, you have these great, let's sit down. You have these great skills. Let's leverage these so you can make it happen. So I think a person who opens up the world for the people that are reporting into them or that they're working with, they really get them, as I said before, to understand who they can be and to believe in them, right? Because a lot of times we don't believe in ourselves. When someone who is in a leader position believes in us, it has such an impact.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I'm so glad that you have decided to join me and my guest today, because you're going to walk away with some new insights about what it means to lead in a complicated world. You're also going to hear some stories of triumph and overcoming some pretty deep obstacles as all of us face. And you might pick up a couple of things that you hadn't thought about in the past. Her name is Marybeth Gregg, and she is a dynamo. You're going to love her. So Marybeth, are you ready for kickoff?
I am. I'm all suited up and ready to play.
I love it. I love it. So, team, I'm going to share a few things about Marybeth, but I'm going to let her fill in most of the gaps. First of all, she is an author. She wrote a wonderful book called How to Soar with a Broken Wing, Finding Tiny Moments of Joy Every Day. And we're certainly going to be talking about that. She has really relied on her own experiences with personal loss, business downturns, the ups and downs of life to bring to her client work a beautiful spirit of things are possible. You can get over the hardship. And, sometimes life is wonderful and sometimes life is hard. She founded an organization called the International Center for Women's Leadership, also known as ICWL. And she's got experience in human resources. She's been an executive with all kinds of international consumer product companies. I think at one point you worked for the Thomas's English muffin brand. I mean, there's all kinds of wonderful bits of history for you. And her main focus today is on developing women as leaders to stop playing small, to own our power. But she also has a broader vision that the world can be more receptive to our creativity and the gifts that we are here to share with each other. So Marybeth, with that said, welcome to the show. And let's get started with you sharing your story of when you got the call to leadership. How old were you? What was going on in your life? Give us some context about who you are and how leadership has been an instrumental part of your life.
Well, thank you so much. I was so excited to get your invitation to be here. And
it's wonderful.
Your questions are terrific because it really made me think, right? And to think about things that normally we take for granted. So the question about my call to leadership, and I have to look back, and I feel it came very gradually. I was raised in a kind of a small town in Pennsylvania, and a lot of working class people there, raised to be quiet and respectful. And we don't really traditionally think of leaders as being quiet, right?
Mm-mm.
But and again, this question, made me think the advantage that from doing that I got to observe, right? So a lot to see what worked and what didn't in terms of leaders. And thinking back to this is an interesting story. I had been working in Chicago way back, and I was in the human resources department, and there was a woman, really incredibly intelligent woman, very driven, and she was the head of marketing. And she really had a very strong personality. And one day she called her staff into the room, and she was smiling, and she took her high heels off and threw them against the wall. Like, you can't make this up, right? And people were like trembling. They were terrified. And that story has stuck with me in terms of leadership, because the effect of that was that they were afraid of her,
right?
Afraid to speak up, afraid to do anything. And it was interesting because I got to know her a little bit, and we talked about it later. And she was lovely, one-on-one, but she got into this role of, quote, leader, and she became this other person. So we really talked through that. And I can't say that she changed tremendously, but she was more aware. But for me, stepping back and observing in terms of, whoa, that was not good leadership, right? And, my call, I think, came much after that. I was working for another fun company called Haagen-Dazs.
Oh, Haagen-Dazs, yes.
And I think of that as my funnest company.
Wow.
And it was great. Of course, the product really drove it in terms of not just the quality, but, come try this new flavor, and you unlimited ice cream all day.
Oh, boy.
And there was a time when there was no head of HR. So I just quietly took charge because it was needed. And I think I surprised myself a little bit, and others as well. And the quote by Marianne Williams said, to stop playing, we're not here to play small.
Yes.
And I think that was the first time that I thought, you know what, I can do this. This is an opportunity here. And I got to do this. So I learned so many things from all these experiences that I have. And one thing, Mary Lou, that stands out is that I learned that leaders don't solve problems for others.
Oh.
They
talk more about that.
Yeah. So it's about asking the right questions and getting them to take responsibility, to guide them, to mentor them, and let them fail a little bit as well. But when they start taking responsibility for, their own decisions, it really makes them grow. It makes them grow and develop. And I think that's such a quality of leaders, and that's the difference between leading and managing, right?
Yes.
Managing, listen, this is what you're going to do. But leading is getting them to come up with the answers and solve the problems and fail a little bit. And it's also around being a great role model in everything we do. And I'll talk about a little bit that later. But, leaders get to appreciate and acknowledge other people for who they are, not just for the work that they're doing. And, we're all work in progress, and we get to do this together as a team. And not just for a company, but for, merely for a life journey, right? For our life development. And I think that's kind of like this call to leadership became gradual. And I think it's only been, and I have to honestly say, the last maybe 8 or 10 years or so that I truly felt inside that I was a leader. It was a long journey, and I became, it's a matter for me to felt secure internally, that I no longer would hesitate to speak up and ask the hard questions. And right now I feel this is the best, quote, job that I ever have. I love what I do. I'm coaching people internationally and helping them really, back to like mentor, right? Guide, to get other leaders to understand themselves.
Yes.
As they are now and what they can be.
Yeah.
And
boy, it really all begins with that journey of self-awareness. Who am I? And clearly the woman who threw her high heels against the wall, that's a wonderful dramatic moment.
Right.
Obviously
Yes.
made a big impact on
Yes.
you and probably everybody else in the room. But it's interesting how you could tell pretty quickly that she was suiting up in a uniform that didn't really fit properly.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
she was using a tactic that obviously worked. And sometimes that's what we end up doing. We adapt to our situation. In fact, you talk about this in your book, how, what was it? Heap heating?
Yes.
You would say something in a meeting, and then the man next to you would say the exact same thing and everybody would listen to him. And it was like you hadn't even said anything.
Right.
And there's a lot of women, I'm sure, listening to this, and some men as well, who feel who experience that. I certainly remember experiencing that when I used to work in higher ed. And, believe it or not, you think in education there would be more parity, and there's not. There's still those hierarchies. There was still that sense of positioning. And I would love for you to, based on the work that you have been doing for quite some time now, you've been out on your own, you've written this book. How do you define leadership today? You were in corporate America for many years during some very pivotal times in our history, and that model is still out there. However, the way the world operates and our access to tools like social media and email and video and all this kind of stuff has changed the way we interact with each other. And so I'm curious, what is your definition of what does it mean to be a leader in 2023?
Right. Much different from, when I started out. It was, people didn't really talk about leaders except political leaders or world leaders. It was managing. And now it is really evolved into understanding that leaders have a different role. So it is around developing people, like I said, getting them to make the decision. It's about keeping them on target, right? There's so many distractions, and you just talked about a few of them, but there's also distractions like internally. I was working with a client, very, very, very successful, had high targets for their people, almost like, well, we can never make this happen, right? We do work around mindset around that. But what happened was, it was so incredibly interesting that people would start to get distracted by this number. I have to increase my sales by 50%. I can't do that. I can't do it. I can't do that. And it became a distraction. So the leader would come in and talk about, listen, you have these great, let's sit down. You have these great skills. Let's leverage these so you can make it happen. So a leader becomes, I think, a person who opens up the world for the people that are reporting into them or that they're working with. They really get them, as I said before, to understand who they can be and to believe in them, right? Because a lot of times we don't believe in ourselves.
Yes.
When someone who is in a leader position believes in us, it has such an impact. So I think that's one thing that has changed. And, and from everything I read and the clients that I work with, it is going more to, and it used to be called the softer skills, right? Mentoring and developing and having conversations every day around performance, not just once a year.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the kinds of behaviors that really have an impact. And the other thing that comes to mind when we talk about the role of leaders now is around curiosity. When a leader becomes curious and gets their people to become curious, that's when they get creative. When I work with my clients, we talk about the power of questions and not getting stuck, right? When we get stuck in terms of, I can't do it, or this is the way it always has been, we can't get to solve the problems that are facing us now. When people are in their corners and this is where I am and I'm right, you're wrong, and we're not moving, we don't solve the problems. And to get into that creative space, it becomes, actually, it's kind of an easy step process. You start with like, okay, what's the situation? But then ask the question. So what else can I do? What else can we do together? Who else can be involved? And these kind of questions that leaders ask, and people can ask of themselves as well, really gets people to such incredibly new and different kinds of places that they never could have been before. And I think that's the role of leaders. When I was talking about development, in the past, not so much. You managed, but you didn't necessarily develop people. But that's a big part of now. And I don't know if you see that as well, Mary Lou, in terms of the leadership, that development of people is really an incredibly important skill.
I would agree. I think the conditions of our daily lives have changed enough where, the way companies are structured has evolved, and because of our access to information, thanks to the internet, that changed everything. Now there has to be, everything is transparent now.
Right.
You cannot hide.
Right.
Back in the day when, you were mentioning the word leader was affiliated really only with politics, government.
Mm-hmm.
You think of some of the old, the OGs like Jack Welch, right? Of GE, Lee Iacocca, right? Of Chrysler. Like those guys are predecessors to a very different generation of leadership. You see CEOs now making videos in their homes addressing challenges like when, I think was it back during the holidays when there was all those issues with Southwest Airlines, right? There was also an issue with, I remember seeing, because I'm an Alaska Airlines fan. I love Alaska Airlines, and they had some kind of issue. And so the CEO just sat down and turned on the phone and made a video and sent it out to everybody on the list. That's probably over 1 million people. And it was very fireside chatty versus, we're in charge. And there wasn't that posturing. It was more of, I'm feeling for you. We're doing the best we can. We want to bring you the service and quality you expect of our brand and That's a whole different skill set than throwing your shoes against the wall.
Right, totally.
And scaring people into behaving a certain way.
Right.
Yeah.
And that behavior is box-like, right?
Yeah.
They don't come up with the best solutions, and that's what we're looking for, or being their best selves, and creating an atmosphere of fear versus an atmosphere of, it's kind of fun to get to work today,
Exactly.
And it's right.
You've worked for some fun companies, you've been able to do that.
I still do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I just love it. And what you were just talking about reminds me of something else, which is legacy. And we tend to think of legacy as for sports people or, superstars or, important, powerful people. But I've really come to the conclusion that we certainly all have a legacy, and we don't in every moment. So we don't even realize sometimes the effect that we have on other people. And that's why it's so important when we're talking about our self-talk, right? It's so important to figure out how we also are relating to others. And this was a little story. This happened last summer, I guess. I live at this very little town along the beach in New Jersey. And this store opened up, this bakery, wonderful bakery in this town next to me. And people were just in love because it was the best croissants in the world, Finally come to the New Jersey shore.
Finally,
right. Everybody flocked there. And so I was in line. My daughter had come to visit and she loved this one particular raisin croissant. So I'm going to get her that. So I was in line and of course the line's out the door. And there was this young man, probably college age before me. And we get up to the counter. He goes first and oh my gosh, he must have like had 12 of these and 10 of these and like, he like almost white. So I said, oh, do you have wine raisin croissant left? They go, no, he just bought them all.
Oh, no.
I know. So they looked at me and, he went his merry way. So I got something else. Of course, not the end of the world, right? But it was like, oh no. So I went outside and he was waiting for me and he goes, you know what? You look like this was really important to you. I'm going to give it to you. And I was like,
that's cool.
Isn't it? I was almost in tears, and I was so thankful. And I thought, but see, that's a legacy, right?
Yes.
It's about how other people think about you. Yes. And so we never know. We never know what those effects are going to be. And one of the things, and this is, gosh, something a little bit hard for me and for other people as well in leadership, is to have the courage really to challenge people. And because when they don't walk their talk, it's up to us to say, oh, wait, something's off here. Mm-hmm. Because if their legacy, I want to be known as this wonderful leader and manager and everything's love and wonderful, but they're not behaving that way. Mm-hmm. It really takes courage to say, can we talk about this because there's something off? Yeah. And I had to do that. I didn't have to do that, but I decided to do that a while back. And what the words were and the vision and the values and the mission was so different from behaviors. And nobody would speak up, right? And which I thought was really interesting. But I'm at a place in my life, and it comes with experience, I think. But also, it's like, you know what? This is really important, and somebody needs to say something. Yeah. So we had this conversation, and it had an impact. Again, he didn't change, but he was so much more aware, and really scaled back the stuff that was incongruent. Right. With what was being said, but courage, I think that's also a key behavior and skill for leaders to have. Absolutely.
It is.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
It absolutely is. And I've learned that the opposite of courage is not cowardice. It's not, running away or hiding. It's really conformity. It's towing the line. It's right. Going along with what everybody else is doing. And it does take cojones to speak up and pull somebody aside and say, hey, listen, and you can do it in a way that you obviously teach, Marybeth, which is through asking questions. Right. It doesn't have to be an attack and it's not personal. It's like, listen, I've noticed some things around here. What are you noticing? Kind of easing them into that. And I know you do talk about legacy in your book, and I'd like to shift a little bit to, first of all, I love the title, How to Soar with a Broken Wing. How did you come up with that title? It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. And that's one of the hardest parts, coming up with a title.
Oh, that's funny. I love I come up with titles all the time. Oh. And sometimes it's hard for me to get the content to go with it.
Okay. I started backwards.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And it was, it was a little bit about feeling broken, after my husband, we had been married 30 years after he passed away, but I didn't want to be broken. So I played with that word, and I actually, I came up with a few titles and send them out to a few dear trusted friends. And so when I got back, again, I can't do this all by myself. Really, it was a conglomerate of what people had sent to me, and it just flowed. Yeah.
It's, again, team, I'll have a link to Marybeth's book on her show notes page at pyppodcast.com, and I encourage you to get this book. It's a lovely read, and it's full of questions. At the end of each chapter, she has a really lovely summary, but then she also has a section called Take Time Now to Reflect. And the questions that she asks at the end of each chapter really do get you thinking about, what am I doing actually here? And one of the questions you ask kind of towards the end of the book is, this one I just wrote, love this question, and I circled it. It says, what is on your to-be list? And I've never heard of a to-be list. I thought, bing, bing, bing. That is huge. So tell us more about, we all know what a to-do list is, but what is a to-be list?
So for me, a few years ago, I started this practice because after what happened with my husband and how I got through that and to where I am now, I started to really reflect in terms of how I was feeling and how I was coming across, and understanding that I had control about this, right? I could decide how I wanted to be and how I wanted to feel. So I started a practice of, in the morning when I wake up, instead of thinking about my to-do list, I say, how do I want to be today? How do I want to be today? And, it might be gratitude. It might be curious. It might be energetic. It might be, I'm going to feel great because I'm going to the gym, and I keep that word in mind. So let's say it's gratitude. So throughout the day, and I might put a little sticker on my computer, gratitude, and reminds me of even though, things are crazy and, we get into overwhelm or things are too much. It's like, just be grateful. I get to do this, right? I don't have to do this. I get to do this. And this practice of to be, how do I want to be when I wake up? And how does that guide me through the day? It really helps. It really helps. And it makes the to-dos easier.
Well, it definitely does. It's a completely different way of framing how you approach it. And I'm going to read a list of some realizations that you came to that, are tied to some of the things you just said. You wrote, each day is going to happen with or without my awareness of its possibilities. I must face my challenges, do my Wonder Woman stance and say, bring it on. My strength lies in my ability to admit that I'm still on this journey, that I am not complete, and that I will forever work toward what I want for my life. I cannot do this alone. I need a coach, a mentor, and a trusted team of family and friends to guide me along my new path and see how it opens each and every day. I have a tribe behind me, visible and invisible. And finally, what am I waiting for? I have right now, this moment, to take control and design my life. No one else can define me. Only I get to do that.
Right.
Oh, man. And this is coming out of a dark time. When you lost your husband, and he was, as you say in the book, he was the love of your life. You have a beautiful daughter with him. He was not your first marriage. You do share your story of, and I think some women and some men would really resonate with that story because, in fact, I just had a conversation earlier this morning about marriage as a tradition, right? It's a tradition that culturally we hold so fast to, and young people today are pushing off getting married, unlike when you got married very young,
right?
And you and your first husband were very young, just out of college, I gathered, and by today's standards, we're still, even by those standards, we're still getting to know who we are, and to enter into that. However, you had the model of your parents that was almost identical to the model of when I was reading about your parents, Marybeth, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is sounds exactly like what I witnessed. My parents, they met at first day of new teacher training at a high school here on Long Island. For my dad, it was love at first sight. He pursued my mother. They were engaged within 4 months, married within a year, and they were each other's, the love of each other's lives. And my mom, like your mom, my mom has Parkinson's. My dad became when she was diagnosed, my dad became her full-time caregiver. Now she's semi-independent, but there's a lot of things she can't do, including drive. And as I was reading your story about your dad just it wasn't even an issue. It was just like, okay, now I'm her
Right.
full-time caregiver.
Right.
My dad did that too until the day he died. And he died at the end of November of 2021. And it was very sudden. We all thought mom would go first.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my point in bringing this up and ties into your journey is you had an idyllic childhood and life was really great. And as a young woman, you were just skipping along. And then when your marriage didn't work out, that was kind of that first big crack in,
Mm-hmm.
ooh,
Right.
life isn't always wonderful and rosy, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'd love for you to talk about, and aim this particularly at women and the men who love them, the journey how is a woman's journey into self-awareness? What are some of the things that you've picked up, as a woman who's gone through, a lot of different iterations of yourself?
Yeah. Wow.
And that's a big question.
And I continue as they say, the journey continues. So, and I think it was around what you were talking about, the role models that I had, picking up on that and again, observing and seeing what worked, seeing what didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I really was blessed. Sometimes I go back, it's like, did I really have a great childhood? And I actually checked with some of my cousins and go, yeah, we really did.
Yeah, it was real.
It was real.
And it was great.
Yes. And, it's funny when you're saying that crack, there was a crack before that. So when I won't say what year I graduated from college, but I had a degree in psychology and like, here I am world, right? Bring it on. And I went for my first interview and the guy said to me, oh yeah, big deal. How fast can you type?
Oh.
And it was like my balloon burst, right?
Oh, man.
What do you mean? I have a degree in psychology,
Wow.
Yeah. And that was really the first crack in terms of like, oh, wow, there's a world out here I didn't know anything about. And I think what happened though was, the importance for me of other people, family and friends, that helped me to, I guess, reinforce the goodness in me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to have that come out and then it was okay. It took a long time for me. It really did. As I say, I was playing small. And when I think about that, we talked about the heat eating. It was my doing. Because I would sit there, be quiet, look down, talk softly. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Of course, nobody's going to take me seriously, but I didn't know that. And later, as I look back, I take responsibility for that. It wasn't necessarily all their fault. I got
Mm-hmm.
to choose to do that because at that point, I didn't really have any coaches or guides or anything. So it was. For me, it was observing, being aware, and always every day I want to learn and I want to develop. And, I know you were talking about being in networking groups and women's groups. And, I take so many courses. One of the things, this was interesting because you were talking about self-talk. And I don't know if you know about Judith Glaser. Her work was called conversational intelligence.
I think I've heard of that term. Yeah.
I had the honor to be in her last class before she passed away.
Oh, wow.
And it was so much around, there's a science, our brain chemistry and our conversations and how that is so interconnected. And when we use the I word, for example, over and over and over again, it creates some more testosterone in the other person listening to somebody talk about I all the time. And I had a client who was wonderful, but I was called in because nobody could get along with him. And I sat in a meeting and he used the I word 32 times in this meeting. He didn't realize it. And everybody was like cringing. It's like, oh my God, I can't stand this person, right? And later, after the meeting, I pulled him aside. I said, did you realize what you did? And no, and he's like the nicest person. And so in Judith Glaser's work, she talks about how, again, awareness of the impact that we have on others. And particularly, as women, we have to understand that, we have, for me, a responsibility to be our best selves. We all do, not just
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's also like connecting with other people and learning every day helps us to be our best. That understanding of ourselves is always changing. We're always on this journey. One of the it was interesting. One of the questions you had was like, who was kind of your role models or your mentors or your coaches? And for me, that's changing all the time as well, adding to, right?
Yes.
And Brené Brown and Clarissa Pinkola Estes and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. There's so many people, Rosa Parks, but one of the recent ones who really has impacted me was an American sculptor called Janet Eckelman. Do you know of her?
I don't.
Oh my gosh, she's amazing. So I stumbled upon one of her initial TED talks.
Uh-huh.
And this really, and this kind of gets back to your question, but she was an artist and she got a Fulbright scholarship to go to India. And she was going to put on this big exhibition of her art and show how she was painting. And she got there and her materials didn't.
Oh, dear.
So now she had to really step up. So she was walking down the beach and she saw these fishermen taking their nets, beautifully colored nets, and creating mounds and untangling them. And so she went into curiosity. What can I do about that, right? What can I do with this to help me? I'm in this dilemma, right? And so she and them, with the fishermen, created this flowing sculpture. So they put it on a pole and the breeze took it and it's moving and it's moving. And she was like, wow, I never would have done this had not it been for something bad had happened.
Right.
And then later on in this talk, she was asked to do this sculpture over the streets of this city. Huge sculpture. And it's going to involve, cranes and steel and all of this. And she didn't know how to do this. And this is the phrase that stood out. But I said yes.
Yes.
I just said yes. Because she knew that this was something, and for all of us, a lot of times we don't know how to do it. But if we really focus on, I'm going to do this, I'll find a way, it happens.
Yes.
So that's a great TED Talk. Janet Eckelman, she's just incredible. So
I'm on her website right now. I'll put a link. My goodness, her work is phenomenal.
Yes.
It's really, you said she was a painter and I'm looking at this and then you talked about the nets. I'm like, aha.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is team you're definitely going to want to check out. This is phenomenal work.
It is. And so these little things like this, if we really tune in and you talked about the distractions before that are around us, tuning into things like this and really listening, really paying attention to what's in front of us really creates, to me, such a difference. When I'm doing coaching work, I turn everything off. And it's like, I'm all in for you, right? I'm all in right now, no distractions, because I want to be the best I can be for the people that I'm working with. And that's turning things off and walking away from that stuff, even Siri.
Even Siri, who was interrupting us.
Right.
They're always listening.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well,
exactly.
I have to say that was that was actually a very funny moment. I've never in all the years I've been podcasting, that has not happened. So this marks a first, and that's powerful. So
for me too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I would love for you as we come here to the end of this amazing conversation. I guess what's one thing you would hope listeners would truly take to heart about their own journey of self-leadership?
So it's around understanding that, we only have a certain amount of time walking this earth, right? And why wait for joy, right? Why wait for things to happen and to be in this moment and to be balanced, when it feels too much, take a break, right? Just stop, be aware of what's going on, breathe, look out the window. When we look up, it creates different brain chemicals, in terms of making us feel better when we look up, when we look outside. It really is that pause, to really stop and give ourselves a break. A lot of times we don't do that,
Yeah.
You were talking in your podcast a little bit about, when do we tell ourselves, hey, you've done a good job or you look great today? And that's a wonderful break and a balance to all this chaos that we're being bombarded with. So I think those are the most important things, to be self-aware. Our emotions are messengers to us, right? And let's listen to what they're saying, right?
I like that.
Yeah, they really are. So even if it's like, I'm not feeling so great, but what's the message here? What should I do instead? And to breathe and take that break and just to know that there's joy everywhere. It's just everywhere and in the little things. And for us to bring that to others, we have such an impact, back to the legacy and of just being kind. We don't know what the crabby person behind the cashier has gone through, right? They might be having just a horrible life, and just to have a little kindness, I think, goes a long way. And that's self-leadership as well.
It is. And for people who'd like to learn more about you and the work that you're doing, where do you hang out online?
So I am at the International Center for Women's Leadership, TICWL.com and /PYP. I have an offer there to send out a couple chapters of my book.
Nice. Wonderful.
And an opportunity to talk to me. I would love to talk to your listeners. Absolutely. I mean, that brings me joy. So.
Oh, it does. It does. Having conversations that are beyond 3 seconds.
Right.
Like TikTok.
Yeah.
I just learned that today, that there's a rule on TikTok that you have to capture your audience's attention within the first 3 seconds. And you can't even begin to open your mouth in 3 seconds. Is already, it's just insane.
That's too much made up pressure.
It really is, right? It really is. And like everything else, things will come and go. I just don't see any of these social platforms being around forever. I mean, we're not driving Model Ts anymore. We're not, most people aren't working in a factory.
Right.
Just life evolves and life changes, and things that are hot one moment are not the next. And one of the things I appreciate about what you do, Marybeth, is you really are working from timeless principles of, you just mentioned kindness and giving yourself some grace and taking a moment to appreciate through gratitude what you've got in a moment, instead of rushing off to the next big thing, whatever that may be. And, Team PYP are readers. So again, certainly I'll have a link to your book on your show notes page, but what are a couple of other books that have really shaped who you are as a leader today?
So there's two that stand out. And this is an older book, but it's called Napkin Notes on the Art of Living. And it's by Dr. Durst is his last name, Michael Durst. And it really talks about taking 100% responsibility. I don't know if you know about the drama triangle, but it's not being a victim or a persecutor or a rescuer. And he talks about that. And it's a powerful behavior model. I use it all the time. But he talks about that, life doesn't happen to us. We get to make life. So it's kind of a fun book. Taming Your Gremlins is another one. That's really a great book, that all these gremlins, the self-talk inside our head. And the other one, it's more of a massive book. It's Women Who Run with the Wolves, Clarissa Pinkola Estes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been a major, that book has had a really major impact on me.
That was a big book that was a big book for a while. When that came out, it rattled a lot of cages because, and you talk about this in your book, you reference that book and you talk about the, unleashing the wild woman inside and not playing small, really listening to what your voice is telling you and then acting on it and that ties in with that other message about taking 100% responsibility for your life. I have knowing what I know now, I have a very hard time with anybody who is stuck in that victim mentality that it's everybody else's fault for why they're so miserable. And I just want to say, I'm like Cher and Moonstruck, snap out of it. You have a choice.
Right.
You can choose to continue to feel miserable because you're thinking about how rotten everything is, or you can choose to frame your life and see, maybe practice gratitude for a while.
Right.
About how amazing it is that you wake up every day and get to go to work.
Right.
Exactly.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Well, those are two great books, actually 3 that I will put on your show notes page as well. And before we say goodbye, any last words for us today?
So I think for each of us is, just to give ourselves a break, just to step back, look around us and find that little joy. It's right in front of us, and it's usually free. It's kindness. It's the bird outside. It's whatever it is, and to smile and put on some great music and dance. That's what I love to do, even by myself. I get to laugh.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today.
This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.